Eddie Jones is back as head coach of Australia. The head of Rugby Australia, Hamish McLennan, said it's a major coup for Australian rugby to have the best coach in the world return home to coach the iconic Wallabies and to oversee the Wallaroos programme. Ian Flanagan said similar things when they got Fiona back to coach the Munster women's team as well. Eddie Jones, this had been rumoured for quite a while when it became kind of clear that maybe there wasn't an extended gardening leave, but I don't think anyone expected to be right here, right now.
Yeah, I think Dave Rennie had a really bad year last year. They lost a lot of games. He was close in a lot of them. I mean, they could have beaten Ireland quite conceivably. They should have beaten the All Blacks, but for that Matthew Raynal decision, which was the correct decision. But anyway, they came quite close. They played. They were a better team that night. But on that, taken as a whole, he finished the year under pressure. And when they were here, there was a lot of question marks over his job. They lost to Italy the previous week. And speaking to the Australian media when they were over, the few guys that were over, there was definitely a sense that Eddie was coming home, that Eddie would be the coach for the Lions in 2025 and for the World Cup at home in 2027. And there was pressure over Rennie, but there was they thought he'd get through to the World Cup, because why would you change at this time of the cycle? But obviously England pulled the trigger, Wales pulled the trigger, England pulled the trigger, and suddenly Eddie was available. And I think he's played quite a clever media game. Now, I can't necessarily explicitly accuse him of planting stories, but there was a big story that appeared that he was going to be part of the USA coach through the next 2 World Cup cycles. He was linked with several jobs. I would say the Australians felt like if they didn't move from now, and Rennie said he would not come on as part of his coaching ticket. Look, that's 2 head coaches. Eddie Jones is not an assistant. I know he was a consultant in 2007 for the Springboks, but he's too big a personality for Dave Rennie to have around. And the Aussies just said, you know what, things could go okay with this guy, but we think our first choice is on the market. He's there now, and in reality, what is it, 8 months to the World Cup? Rennie, they're paying off 8 months worth of a contract, probably not the biggest contract in the world anyway. Why not just bite the bullet, do it now? It's quite cruel on Dave Rennie, because I think he actually could have done a good job with Australia at this year's World Cup, but there's no guarantee that Eddie Jones, I think he'll do well initially, but it always goes south. But
is that the surprise here, the length of the contract? It's fair enough looking for the quick hit over the next 8 months, and he has such a brilliant record at being able to get teams to peak at a World Cup. But a Lions tour, trying to plan 5 years down the track with Eddie Jones, with the way we saw it sort of fall apart in England over the last year.
And with Australia and Japan, I think things, although it went really well at the 2015 World Cup, I think there was players willing to walk away if he'd stayed on, because he takes so much out of you as a coach. I think he's the highest profile, highest regarded Australian coach on the market, and they do have 2 incredibly big events in Australia in the next 4 years. They're a small fish in a big market. We know all about how rugby league is a much bigger sport down there. AFL in different markets, football, they did reasonably well at the World Cup. That's a coming force. So they have to fight for their corner in the media all the time.
So is this as much as the team needs an Eddie Jones, Rugby Union in Australia needs an Eddie Jones?
Yes, yeah, both. And they feel that he can improve the team and get them results at the World Cup, but also he can improve the profile. And I think when you're looking forward to a Lions tour down there in 2025 and a World Cup there, I think he does add something to that. And while Rennie's a very good coach, he wasn't that kind of box office figure. He's quite reserved. He's a Kiwi. They've had 2 New Zealand coaches in the last couple of years, and neither has seemed to fit very well. Whereas Eddie, he's quintessentially, even though he sees himself as an outsider, he's so quintessentially Australian. And it's people look for narratives, people look for big stories to wrap things around. I mean, him going back, having come so close to winning the World Cup, then got the bullet, then gone around the world and done what he's done. That's a compelling thing that you can sell your association on, sell your team on, and also he's a winning rugby coach. He's still England's most successful in results terms coach of all time, and has the best record. He'll tell you himself, he has the best record at World Cups of any coach in terms of winning matches. So it's massive. It's just rugby merry-go-round. It's
great stuff in so many ways. And when I saw this last night, you think Gatlin back at Wales, Eddie Jones back in Australia, 8 months out from World Cup. The build-up is just going to be so intense. There's going to be so many brilliant tangents along the way. But at the same time, Fiona, I feel a little bit queasy saying that about Eddie Jones and getting excited about it and saying that a team needs an Eddie Jones when you read so many of the things that have been said about Eddie Jones in England over the last year, everything that's come out about how he treated staff, even leaving players in tears were some of the reports. It feels as though his style of management is something from 20 years ago, that modern management has to have moved on. You cannot treat people the way that he has treated people at England, but it seems that Australia, and maybe it's a better culture fit over there than it is in England, it feels that that's what they want right now.
Yeah, I think so. And I think Rory, like you hit the nail on the head. It's the initial. He'll go in and he'll obviously bring that style and in today's society, yeah, you'll buy into that for a while. Players buy into that kind of heavy-handed management. But once the losses start coming your way, that's when things change. And we saw that with England in 2020, the 6 defeats and 1 draw. That wasn't the English team. And that's when the players start to question things. And you would never hear of stuff leaked to the media if they were winning. It's almost like when the losses come, you lose your players completely. And that's that style of coaching. And, as in the past, I mean, we've seen it work. He went to Japan. He made massive inroads there with Japanese rugby. He took them out. They all trained a long time. We know that before the World Cup. And he made such, he made their style and they were nice to watch. But I'm not sure 8 months is enough time going into World Cup. Yes, it's huge for Australian rugby because other sports are overtaking them. Grassroots rugby, there's been a lot of talk about it in Australia that, they haven't looked after it, and we're seeing the fruits of that now in how Australians are playing and how they are. But I think with Eddie Jones, I think it's the personality, the face. They wanted that. They brought him in. It's very harsh on Dave Rennie, but I think we all knew once he was gone from England, you just knew somehow we were going to see him in this next World Cup.
10 wins over Australia in 11 games as England coach over the last 7 years as well, which had to have hurt the Australians so much, and I'm sure he was keen to ram it down their throats at every opportunity. We're probably not spending a huge amount of time thinking about Australia in this country because they're on the opposite side of the draw for the World Cup, and it's all about potentially the All Blacks or France and South Africa and thinking about that side of things. Where are Australia? What sort of a group has he taken over?
Like, it's a good squad. When they're all fit, and that was a major problem last year. They had an enormous number of injuries, and by the time they got to Ireland, they were on their last legs, and they lost 2 players to concussion during the game. A couple of more injuries along the way as well, and they still ran, this much vaunted world number 1 Ireland team close. They probably shut down the Irish attack, minus Sexton and Carberry, but they shut down the Irish attack better than most teams out there, and they look like they've a lot of very good players who can play a very good brand of rugby. And if things clicked for them, which is a big if you're running the Australian Rugby Union, you've just watched so many defeats over the course of the year, that they can be a very good team. And they've always been always been a very good World Cup team who can turn up at a tournament and it can come together. And what Jones has always said about its cycle is that it's the one time everyone is equal because you get your players in, you do your pre-season, and it does suit the Southern Hemisphere teams more in that they play their tournament, they do a World Cup, and then they go into it. They don't have club messing up with it like we do in Europe. So they have some extremely talented individual athletes. They have probably the most effective second row in the world in Will Skelton. Their profile is very good. If they get a coach who can get them very organised, and Rennie, I think, was someone I thought could do that, but it just didn't click with them. But Jones has a lot of raw materials to work with. If he can, it's a big ask, but he's not the only on that side of the draw. The 3 biggest teams probably, maybe Argentina as well, but 3 of the teams have just changed their coach. So it's not like he's at a disadvantage against England and Wales, who he'd likely meet, who will meet along the way. And Argentina, like Czech is not in Argentina that long either. So you've got this one-sided draw that's incredibly settled and all building 4-year cycles. New Zealand's had a bit of change, and all the 4 best teams in the world are on there. On the other side of the draw, you've got chaos. And who thrives in chaos? Eddie likes a bit of chaos. I think he'll relish that. Gatlin will as well. Borthwick's the least experienced guy there, and he seems like a bit of a control freak. So I don't know how he's going to adapt to trying to pull this all together in a short period of time.
So it wasn't just Eddie Jones we spoke about on Monday Night Rugby. There was a whole lot more with Rory O'Connor and Fiona Hayes. We spoke about the 4 provinces and their results in Europe at the weekend, and also what it means for Andy Farrell's Ireland squad selection on Thursday as well. We also spoke about the women's interprovincial games. If you want to hear all that, remember the only place to listen back to Monday Night Rugby, to Wednesday Night Rugby, to Brian O'Driscoll, to hear it in full, is by subscribing to OTB Rugby on the Off the Ball Podcast Network. Just get onto the app and hit subscribe there. It's the easiest way to get it, and you'll be able to hear the full conversation every single week and get all our podcasts straight to your phone.